Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Business English Mastery. I'm Sarah, and I'm here with my co-host, Alex. How's it going, Alex?
Hey Sarah, I'm doing great. Excited to dive into today's topic. We're going to cover some essential vocabulary and phrases that are commonly used in business settings. This is going to be super helpful for anyone looking to improve their business English skills.
Absolutely. Let's start with something basic but crucial. Introductions in a business environment. When you're meeting someone for the first time in a professional setting, what are some key phrases you should know?
Great question. When introducing yourself, you might say, "Hi, my name is Alex. I'm the project manager at XYZ Corporation." It's always good to include your name and your role or title.
Right? And if you're introducing someone else, you could say, "I'd like you to meet Sarah, our head of marketing." It's polite and provides context for the introduction.
Exactly. Moving on, let's talk about meetings. Meetings are a big part of business life. What are some phrases we use when scheduling a meeting?
When scheduling a meeting, you could say, "Can we schedule a meeting for next Tuesday at 10 a.m.?" Or, "I'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss the new project."
And if you need to reschedule, you might say, "Can we reschedule our meeting to Thursday instead?" Or, "Something has come up. Could we move our meeting to a later time?"
Good points. Now, during the meeting, there are a few key phrases that are useful. For instance, when you want to start the meeting, you could say, "Let's get started," or "Shall we begin?"
And if you want to contribute to the discussion, you might say, "I'd like to add something," or "Can I jump in here?"
Exactly. And to summarize what has been discussed, you could say, "To summarize, we've agreed on the following points." It's important to wrap up meetings with a clear summary.
That's a great tip. Speaking of discussions, negotiations are another critical aspect of business. What are some useful phrases for negotiating?
During negotiations, you might say, "We need to discuss the terms of the contract," or "Can we negotiate the price?" It's important to be clear and direct.
And if you want to make a counteroffer, you could say, "We can't accept that offer, but we can propose," or "Would you consider?"
Absolutely. And if an agreement is reached, you might say, "We have a deal," or "I'm happy with these terms."
Great. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about presentations. Presentations are a common way to share information in a business setting. What are some key phrases for starting a presentation?
When starting a presentation, you might say, "Good morning, everyone. Today, I'll be presenting our quarterly sales report." It's important to greet your audience and introduce the topic.
And to engage your audience, you could use phrases like, "As you can see from this slide," or "Let me draw your attention to." It's all about keeping them interested.
Absolutely. And if you want to invite questions at the end, you could say, "I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have," or "Feel free to ask questions at any time."
Those are great tips. Now, let's move on to email communication, which is essential in business. What are some common phrases for starting and ending a business email?
When starting a business email, you might write, "Dear Sam, I hope this email finds you well." And for ending, you could use "Best regards" or "Sincerely," followed by your name.
And if you're requesting information, you could write, "Could you please provide me with," or "I would appreciate it if you could send me."
Exactly. And if you need to apologize for something, you might write, "I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused," or "I'm sorry for the delay in responding."
Those are very useful. Now let's touch on some business idioms and expressions that are commonly used. For instance, thinking outside the box.
Yes, thinking outside the box means to think creatively and not be limited by traditional ideas. Another one is hit the ground running, which means to start something and proceed at a fast pace with enthusiasm.
And there's in the loop, which means being informed and included in something. For example, "Please keep me in the loop about the project updates."
Great examples. Another useful phrase is "on the same page," which means to have a shared understanding. You might say, "Let's make sure we're all on the same page before we move forward."
Perfect. And how about cutting corners, which means to do something in a way that saves time or money, but maybe not the best quality? For example, we can't afford to cut corners on this project.
Right. Those are all fantastic phrases. Lastly, let's discuss some polite expressions that can help in maintaining professionalism. For instance, instead of saying, I don't know, you could say, I'm not sure at the moment, but I will find out and get back to you.
That's a great one. Another polite phrase is, could you please, instead of just saying, please. It adds a level of politeness to your request.
Absolutely. And instead of saying, you're wrong, you might say, I see your point, but I think, or I have a different perspective on this.
Those little changes can make a big difference in how you're perceived in a professional setting.
Definitely. Well, that's all we have time for in today's episode. We hope you found these business English phrases and vocabulary helpful. So Alex, now that we've covered some essential phrases and vocabulary, let's dive a bit deeper into specific business scenarios. How about we start with job interviews? They can be quite daunting, especially for non-native speakers.
Absolutely. Job interviews are crucial, and having the right phrases can make a big difference. For instance, when you're asked to tell about yourself, you could start with, I have a background in, or my experience includes.
That's a good point. And when discussing your strengths, you might say, one of my key strengths is, or I excel in.
And for weaknesses, it's important to frame them positively. You could say, one area I'm working to improve is, or a challenge I've faced is, and I'm taking steps to address it by.
Exactly. Moving on to project management, which is another area where business English is essential. When assigning tasks, you could use phrases like, I need you to handle, or could you take the lead on?
And when setting deadlines, you might say, the deadline for this project is, or please ensure this is completed by.
Communication during projects is key. When giving feedback, you could say, I appreciate your effort on this, but, or this part of the project needs improvement because.
And positive feedback is just as important. You could say, great job on, or your work on this project has been outstanding.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about networking events. These can be great opportunities for making connections, but they can also be intimidating. What are some good phrases to use when introducing yourself at a networking event?
At a networking event, you might start with, hi, I'm Alex, and I work in marketing at XYZ Corporation. It's also good to follow up with, what brings you to this event? Or, what do you do?
And to keep the conversation going, you could ask, how did you get started in your industry? Or, what projects are you currently working on?
That's right. And when you want to exchange contact information, you could say, can I get your business card? Or, I'd love to stay in touch. What's the best way to reach you? Great tips. Now, let's talk about client meetings. When meeting with a client for the first time, it's important to establish a good rapport. You might start with, it's a pleasure to meet you, or thank you for taking the time to meet with us.
And during the meeting, when you want to highlight your services, you could say, we specialize in, or our main focus is on.
If you need to discuss pricing, you could use phrases like, our pricing structure is, or we can offer you a discount of.
And when you're looking to close the deal, you might say, are you ready to move forward? Or what can we do to get started?
Those are really useful. Another critical area is crisis management. When handling a crisis, communication needs to be clear and effective. If you need to address an issue, you might say, we are aware of the issue and are working to resolve it.
And to reassure clients or stakeholders, you could say, we're taking steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. Or, we appreciate your patience as we address this matter.
Definitely. And finally, let's touch on performance reviews. When giving a performance review, you could start with, I'd like to discuss your performance over the past year.
And for constructive feedback, you might say, one area for improvement is, or you've done well in, but there's room for improvement in.
Positive feedback is crucial as well. You could say, you've consistently exceeded expectations in, or your work on has been exemplary.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into specific business scenarios and the essential phrases you can use. We hope you found this helpful.
Yes, we covered a lot of ground today, from job interviews and project management to networking and crisis management. Remember, practice makes perfect.
Hey, Alex. Before we wrap up completely, let's quickly go over some useful phrases for writing business reports. This is another area where precise language is key.
Great idea, Sarah. When starting a business report, you might begin with, "This report outlines," or "The purpose of this report is to..."
And when presenting data, you could use phrases like, "according to the data," or "the figures indicate that."
To summarize findings, you might say, "In conclusion," or "The key takeaway is..."
And if you're providing recommendations, you could use, "We recommend implementing," or "It is suggested that."
Those are excellent points. And when you need to reference sources, you could say, "As referenced in," or "Based on the study conducted by..."
Definitely. Clear and precise language in business reports can make a big difference in how your message is received. Hey, Alex. Now that we've covered writing business reports, let's dive into business meetings and negotiations in a bit more detail. These are areas where language precision can really impact outcomes.
Sure, Sarah. When starting a business meeting, after the initial greetings, you might say, "Let's review the agenda," or "Our main objectives for this meeting are..."
That's right. And when you need to assign tasks or roles, you could use phrases like, "John, could you take the lead on this?" Or, "Sarah, please prepare the presentation for our next meeting."
If you're in a meeting and need to clarify something, you might say, "Could you please elaborate on that?" Or, "I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat it?"
Those are very useful. And if you need to interrupt politely, you could say, "Excuse me for interrupting, but," or "Can I add something here?"
Great points. In negotiations, when you're making an initial offer, you might say, "We propose," or "Our initial offer is..."
And if you need to counter an offer, you could use, "We cannot agree to that, but we can offer," or "Would you consider?"
To reach an agreement, you might say, "We have a deal," or "I'm happy to move forward with these terms."
And if things are moving slowly, you could try to expedite the process by saying, "Can we expedite this?" Or, "Is there any way to speed up the decision-making process?"
Now, let's talk a bit about phone calls in a business setting. When making a call, you might start with, "Hi, this is Alex from XYZ Corporation. I'm calling to discuss..."
And when you need to leave a message, you could say, "Could you please have John call me back at his earliest convenience?" Or, "I'm calling to follow up on..."
If you're taking a message, it's helpful to say, "Can I take a message?" Or, "I'll make sure they get your message."
Exactly. Moving on, let's discuss business travel. When discussing travel plans, you might say, "I'm scheduled to fly out on," or "I'll be attending the conference from..."
And if you're arranging accommodations, you could use, "I need to book a hotel room for..." or "Can you recommend any good places to stay in?"
For making reservations, you might say, "I'd like to reserve a conference room for..." or "Can I book a table for a business lunch?"
Those are great examples. Let's also cover some customer service phrases. If you're handling a complaint, you could say, "I apologize for the inconvenience. How can we resolve this?" Or, "We're sorry to hear that. Let me see what I can do to help."
And when offering solutions, you might say, "We can offer you a replacement," or "Would you be interested in a discount on your next purchase?"
Excellent. Now, let's talk about cross-cultural communication in business. When working with international partners, it's important to be mindful of cultural differences. For example, when addressing time management, you might say, "Let's schedule a meeting time that works for both of us." Or, "Please consider the time difference when scheduling."
And when discussing business etiquette, you might say, "In our culture, it's customary to," or "How is this usually handled in your country?"
Those are crucial. Understanding and respecting cultural differences can greatly enhance business relationships.
Absolutely. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about motivational and team-building phrases. When encouraging your team, you might say, "Great job, team. Let's keep up the good work." Or, "I appreciate everyone's hard work and dedication."
And for boosting morale, you could say, "Let's celebrate our success," or "I'm proud of what we've accomplished together."
Definitely. Positive reinforcement can go a long way in maintaining team spirit and productivity.
So true. Another important aspect is conflict resolution. When resolving conflicts, you might say, let's find a solution that works for everyone, or how can we resolve this issue?
And to ensure everyone feels heard, you could use, I understand your perspective. Let's discuss this further. Or can we find a middle ground?
Excellent points. And don't forget performance evaluations. You could start with, let's review your performance over the last quarter, or here are some areas where you've excelled and others where there's room for improvement.
And when setting future goals, you might say, let's set some goals for the next quarter. Or what do you hope to achieve moving forward?
That's a great way to keep the conversation focused on growth and development.
Absolutely. And finally, let's discuss some phrases for networking online, which has become increasingly important. When connecting on LinkedIn, you might say, I'd like to connect with you to discuss, or I'm interested in learning more about your work in.
And when following up after an online event, you could say, it was great meeting you at the webinar. I'd love to continue our conversation, or thank you for your insights during the virtual conference. Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from detailed scenarios to online networking.
Yes, and we hope our listeners found this comprehensive guide to business English useful. Remember, the key to mastering business English is practice and consistency. Oh, Alex, before we completely wrap up, there's one more area I think we should touch on: handling difficult conversations. This is something many people struggle with, especially in a business context.
Absolutely, Sarah. When addressing a difficult issue, it's important to be clear and empathetic. You might start with, I understand this is a difficult topic, but we need to discuss, or I appreciate your hard work, but there are some concerns we need to address.
And if you need to give negative feedback, you could say, I've noticed some areas where improvement is needed, or let's talk about how we can improve in this area.
It's also crucial to listen actively during these conversations. You could use phrases like, I hear what you're saying, or can you help me understand your perspective? It's also crucial to listen actively during these conversations. You could use phrases like, I hear what you're saying, or can you help me understand your perspective?
And when finding a resolution, you might say, what steps can we take to address this issue? Or let's work together to find a solution.
Absolutely. And don't forget to follow up. You might say, let's schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss progress. Or I'm here to support you as we work through this.
Well, I think we've covered a comprehensive range of business English phrases and scenarios now.
Yes, I think so too. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. Remember, effective communication is key to success in the business world.
Wait, Alex, there's one more area we haven't touched on yet: writing business proposals. This is another critical skill for anyone in the business world.
You're right, Sarah. When starting a business proposal, you could begin with, we are pleased to submit this proposal for, or the purpose of this proposal is to.
And when detailing your solutions or offerings, you might say, our solution includes, or we propose to implement.
When discussing benefits, you could use, the key benefits of our proposal are, or this proposal will help you achieve.
To conclude the proposal, you might say, in conclusion, we believe our proposal offers, or we look forward to discussing this proposal with you further.
Those are essential phrases, and when you need to follow up, you could say, we'd like to follow up on our proposal, or do you have any questions about our proposal?
Perfect. I think we've really covered all the bases now.
Absolutely. Thanks again to our listeners for joining us. Keep practicing these phrases, and you'll master business English in no time.
Alex, before we finally wrap up, there's just one last area: writing business reports. This is essential for conveying information clearly and professionally.
Great idea, Sarah. When starting a business report, you might begin with, this report aims to, or the purpose of this report is to.
And when presenting your findings, you could say, our analysis shows that, or the data indicates that.
When making recommendations, you might use, we recommend implementing, or it would be beneficial to.
And for summarizing, you could say, in conclusion, we found that, or the key takeaways are.
Those are great phrases. And don't forget to include phrases like, based on our research or according to the data?
Perfect. Now we've truly covered a comprehensive range of business English scenarios.
Absolutely. Thanks once again to our listeners. Keep practicing and improving your business English skills.
Until next time, stay confident and keep honing those skills.